December 1944, the Ardennes Forest. When Corporal James Hewitt's M1 Garand jammed during a German ambush, he grabbed the only weapon left, a Springfield M1903 marked "Condemned" in red paint. Command had banned these rifles after accuracy complaints, but in the next 36 hours, Hewitt would prove that sometimes the broken weapon in the right hands beats the perfect weapon in the wrong ones. The snowfall started at 0430 hours on December 16, 1944, near Elsenborn Ridge, Belgium. Corporal James Hewitt, 24, from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, could smell diesel exhaust mixed with pine sap as half-tracks rumbled past his foxhole. The temperature held at 22 degrees Fahrenheit. His breath formed clouds that hung in the air like accusatory ghosts. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, German voices echoed through the forest. Operation Wacht am Rhein had begun, though American forces didn't know it yet. In 48 hours, this sector would become the northern shoulder of what history would call the Battle of the Bulge. Hewitt's company, Baker Company, 2nd Battalion, 99th Infantry Division, held a 2-mile stretch of forest considered quiet sector by command. The 99th was a Green Division, arrived in theatre just 5 weeks earlier. Of Baker Company's 187 men, only 14 had seen combat before. The rest were farm boys from Iowa, factory workers from Detroit, college students from California who'd been drafted in early 1943 and spent 18 months training stateside before shipping to Europe in October. The M1 Garand rifles they carried represented the pinnacle of American small arms technology, semi-automatic, 8-round clips, gas-operated, capable of sustained fire that gave American infantry a critical advantage over German troops still using bolt-action Kar 98K rifles. General George Patton called the Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised, but technology meant nothing when it failed. At 0532 hours, German artillery began falling on American positions. Hewitt counted 18 seconds between flash and impact, meaning the gun sat approximately 4 miles east. The barrage lasted 14 minutes. When it stopped, the forest held an unnatural silence, broken only by wounded men moaning and the creak of damaged trees. Then came the German infantry, Feldgrau uniforms materializing from the snow like nightmares taking physical form. Hewitt raised his M1 Garand, acquired a target at 80 yards, squeezed the trigger. The rifle fired once, then jammed. The operating rod had frozen, a common problem in sub-freezing temperatures when moisture contaminated the gas system. Around him, 6 other Garands jammed simultaneously. The Army had issued cold-weather lubricant 3 weeks earlier, but supply chains being what they were, Baker Company never received it. Men died because bureaucracy moves slower than bullets. German fire cut down Private Morrison from Detroit, who'd shown Hewitt photographs of his newborn daughter just hours earlier. Corporal Davis from Sacramento took rounds through his chest while trying to clear his jammed rifle. The German advance continued, disciplined, methodical, overwhelming. Baker Company began falling back through the snow, abandoning positions they'd held for 5 weeks. Hewitt retreated to a supply dugout carved into a hillside. Inside, amongst crates of ammunition and rations, he found the weapons that weren't supposed to exist. 23 Springfield M1903 rifles, bolt-action relics from World War I, each stamped "Condemned" in red paint. These rifles had been pulled from frontline service 4 months earlier after accuracy complaints from units in Normandy. Tests at Aberdeen Proving Ground revealed that roughly 30% of M1903 rifles manufactured between 1917 and 1918 suffered from heat treatment issues that caused barrel warping. Rather than determine which specific rifles were defective, Command simply condemned entire production runs and ordered them destroyed. But destruction takes time and resources, neither of which existed in abundance in combat zones. So the condemned Springfields sat in supply dugouts, waiting for some rear echelon quartermaster to process the paperwork. They were forbidden weapons, technically. Using one meant risking court-martial for employing defective equipment that could endanger fellow soldiers. But court-martial seemed preferable to being overrun by German infantry. Hewitt grabbed the least damaged-looking Springfield, a rifle with stock scratches suggesting it had seen service in the Argonne Forest in 1918. The weapon felt heavy compared to the Garand, solid in a way that suggested reliability through mechanical simplicity. Bolt action meant slower fire rate, but it also meant fewer parts to freeze, fewer opportunities for malfunction. He found a bandolier containing 60 rounds of 30-06 Springfield ammunition and slung it across his chest. Outside the dugout, the situation had deteriorated. German forces had broken through on the left flank. Lieutenant Morrison, the company commander, was organizing a fighting retreat toward the secondary defensive line 2 miles west. Of Baker Company's 187 men, perhaps 90 remained combat effective. The rest were dead, wounded, or scattered through the forest, trying to escape encirclement. Hewitt positioned himself behind a fallen oak tree, offering clear sightlines across a snow-covered clearing. German infantry appeared at the tree line 250 yards distant. Through the Springfield's iron sights, he could see individual soldiers conferring with their sergeant, pointing toward American positions, preparing their assault. The rifle's action felt stiff from decades of storage, but it cycled. That was all that mattered. The first German soldier Hewitt killed wore wire-rimmed glasses and carried an MP-40 submachine gun. Range, 230 yards. Time, 0614 hours. The Springfield kicked hard against Hewitt's shoulder, harder than the Garand's gas-operated system. The German dropped without sound, audible over the ongoing firefight. Hewitt cycled the bolt, brass casing ejecting into snow that immediately began covering it. He acquired a second target, fired, cycled. The condemned rifle's barrel might be warped, might send rounds tumbling unpredictably at longer ranges, but at 200 yards, it remained lethal. Baker Company's retreat became a running battle through forests, where every clearing represented a killing ground and every ridgeline offered temporary defensive advantage before German numbers forced another withdrawal. The snowfall intensified, reducing visibility to 300 yards. This worked in the Americans' favor. German numerical superiority meant less when they couldn't mass forces effectively, but it also meant getting separated from friendly units became terrifyingly easy. By 0800 hours, Hewitt had lost contact with the rest of Baker Company. He found himself with 7 other soldiers: Private Jenkins from Texas, Private O'Malley from Boston, Corporal Washington from Alabama, Private Kowalski from Chicago, Private Chen from San Francisco, Private Anderson from Minnesota, and Private Martinez from New Mexico. None of them knew each other before this morning. They were 8 men who'd simply ended up together through the chaos of combat, now responsible for each other's survival. They took position in a bombed-out farmhouse overlooking the main road to Elsenborn. Through the collapsed second floor, they had sightlines covering 400 yards of approach. German forces were using this road to move supplies and reinforcements toward the breakthrough points. American artillery should have been interdicting this route, but the German barrage had destroyed forward observer positions and severed communication lines. So 8 American soldiers with 5 working rifles and 280 rounds of ammunition appointed themselves the interdiction force. The Springfield's slow rate of fire became an advantage. While the other soldiers burned through their limited ammunition with Garand semi-automatic fire, Hewitt made every shot deliberate. The rifle forced patience, forced him to breathe between shots, forced him to select targets methodically. At 0845 hours, a German motorcycle courier appeared on the road. Hewitt waited until he reached the kill zone, then fired. The motorcycle crashed, the courier sprawled motionless, and whatever orders or intelligence he carried remained undelivered to German command. Through the morning, they engaged German patrols, supply trucks, and small units moving toward the front. The Springfield's mechanical simplicity meant it continued functioning while frost built up on other weapons. O'Malley's Garand froze completely at 10:30 hours. He switched to capture German ammunition and a Kar 98K taken from a dead soldier. Kowalski's rifle developed a feeding issue that required manually chambering each round. Only Hewitt's condemned Springfield and Washington's Garand continued operating normally. The temperature dropped to 18 degrees. Snow accumulated 8 inches deep. German forces began sweeping the forests systematically, searching for scattered American units. At 12:45 hours, a German patrol of 12 men approached the farmhouse. Hewitt counted 8 rifles, 3 MP40s, 1 officer with a Luger. They moved carelessly, assuming American forces had retreated miles west by now. The assumption cost them. Hewitt's first shot dropped the officer at 180 yards. His second shot hit the sergeant trying to organize a response. The remaining Germans dove for cover, but found none adequate. Washington's Garand fire swept the road. Jenkins and Martinez threw grenades. The engagement lasted 90 seconds. 11 German soldiers died. 1 escaped. That survivor meant their position was compromised. They abandoned the farmhouse at 13:20 hours, moving west through forests where snow covered their tracks within minutes. But German forces were everywhere now, flooding through the breach in American lines, pushing toward the Meuse River and the vital supply depots beyond. Avoiding contact became impossible. At 15:50 hours, they stumbled into another German patrol. At 17:10 hours, they ambushed a supply column. Each engagement consumed precious ammunition. Each engagement added minutes to their survival. By nightfall, they'd linked up with remnants of another unit from the 2nd Infantry Division. Together, 23 Americans dug fighting positions on a hillside overlooking the road junction at Crinkelt. Command had designated this junction a critical holding point. If German forces seized it, they'd have direct access to the supply routes feeding First Army's northern positions. 23 men, inadequate ammunition, no artillery support, no air support because weather grounded all aircraft, no reinforcements because every available unit was committed elsewhere. Just Americans who decided that retreat stopped here. The German assault began at 21:30 hours, infantry supported by 2 Stu G3 assault guns. The assault guns, 75mm cannons, demolished the farmhouse the Americans were using as a strong point, but the Americans had positioned themselves in foxholes 100 yards behind the farmhouse specifically to survive such bombardment. When German infantry advanced past the burning farmhouse, assuming resistance was broken, they walked into concentrated fire from 23 rifles and 2 machine guns salvaged from destroyed vehicles. Hewitt fired the Springfield until his shoulder ached from recoil, until his fingers grew numb from cycling the bolt, until the barrel grew hot enough to melt snow that drifted against it. The condemned rifle that wasn't supposed to be accurate enough for combat put rounds exactly where he aimed, 220 yards into a German running toward the American line, 195 yards into an officer trying to rally his men, 240 yards into a machine gunner setting up on the flank. German intelligence officers reviewing casualty reports on December 17th noticed an anomaly in the Elsenborn sector. American defensive positions that should have collapsed within hours continued resisting with unexpected effectiveness. Captured equipment revealed something perplexing. American forces were employing M1903 Springfield rifles, weapons supposedly phased out of frontline service. German doctrine presumed American infantry carried M1 Garands exclusively, providing them with significant firepower advantage. The presence of bolt-action rifles suggested either severe equipment shortages or units so shattered they were arming themselves with museum pieces. German commanders interpreted this as evidence of American disintegration and ordered continued aggressive advance. They presumed an army reduced to using World War I rifles represented an army on the verge of collapse. This interpretation proved catastrophically wrong. The Springfields appeared not from desperation, but from necessity, and in the hands of soldiers like Hewitt, they remained deadly. The doctrinal blindness ran deeper than simple intelligence failure. German military philosophy emphasized technological superiority and operational excellence. They developed the Sturmgewehr 44, the world's first assault rifle. They fielded Tiger tanks that outgunned anything the Americans possessed. Their military doctrine presumed that superior technology plus superior training equaled inevitable victory. When confronted with Americans using obsolete rifles, achieving impossible results, German commanders couldn't reconcile observed reality with doctrinal expectations. A captured German lieutenant from the 12th SS Panzer Division, interrogated on December 18th, expressed confusion. "We were told American soldiers were poorly trained conscripts who relied on material superiority. But these men fight like veterans. They don't break when they should break. Their marksmanship is exceptional. We assumed capturing their positions would be straightforward. Instead, every meter costs us men we cannot replace." What German commanders failed to understand was that American soldiers weren't relying on technological superiority. They were relying on fundamentals: marksmanship, fire discipline, tactical patience. The Springfield's bolt-action design forced these fundamentals. A soldier with an M1 Garand could fire 8 rounds in rapid succession, but a soldier with a Springfield had to make each shot count. That discipline, that requirement for precision, made men like Hewitt more dangerous, not less. At 0340 hours on December 18th, German forces launched another assault on the Crinkled Road junction. This attack came with more preparation: artillery barrage, smoke screens, coordinated infantry, and armor advance. The assault guns that survived the previous night's fighting returned, this time supported by a Panzer IV tank. Against such forces, 23 riflemen should have been annihilated. The outcome surprised everyone. Hewitt positioned himself in a foxhole, offering clear sight lines toward the German assembly area, 350 yards east. Through gaps in the smoke, he could see infantry forming up behind the armor. The Springfield's iron sights weren't designed for low-light shooting, but Hewitt had grown up hunting deer in Iowa darkness. He understood how to use ambient light, how to track movement more than shapes, how to lead targets accounting for wind and bullet drop. The German infantry advanced behind their armor, using the vehicles as mobile cover. Standard doctrine, sensible doctrine. But armor moves faster than infantry, and maintaining that protective distance requires constant adjustment. When the Panzer IV accelerated to cross a shell crater, the infantry fell behind momentarily. In that 2-second window, Hewitt fired. A German soldier dropped. The others dove for cover, disrupting their formation. The assault gun crews, unable to see individual soldiers in darkness and smoke, couldn't provide effective support. The American machine gunner exploited the confusion, raking the German line. The assault stalled. Through 36 hours of continuous combat, Hewitt fired the condemned Springfield 127 times. By official count, later verified by witnesses and physical evidence, he killed 11 German soldiers. But the number understated his impact. Every shot forced German infantry to seek cover. Every shot slowed their advance. Every shot gave other American defenders time to reposition, reload, survive. The rifle that had been condemned as too inaccurate for combat achieved a documented kill ratio that would have been remarkable with any weapon. Hewitt's kills represented just a fraction of German casualties in this sector, but they came at critical moments. The motorcycle courier, whose death delayed German intelligence about American positions. The officer whose death disrupted a coordinated assault. The machine gunner whose death prevented German forces from establishing fire superiority. Each death rippled through German operations in ways that transcended simple body counts. In military terms, Hewitt had achieved force multiplication, one soldier with one rifle generating effects disproportionate to his resources. By dawn on December 19th, German forces had failed to capture the Crinkled Road junction despite overwhelming numerical and technological advantages. The 99th Infantry Division's stubborn defense along the Elsenborn Ridge had prevented German breakthrough to the vital Meuse River crossings. Historians would later credit this defense as critical to defeating the German offensive. The ridge that wasn't supposed to hold, held by soldiers who weren't supposed to be effective, using weapons that weren't supposed to work. When the Battle of the Bulge ended on January 25, 1945, Allied forces had suffered 89,000 casualties. But the German offensive, which aimed to split Allied armies and capture Antwerp, had failed completely. The Northern Shoulder defense, where Hewitt's actions occurred, proved critical. By holding Elsenborn Ridge, American forces denied German armor the road network necessary for rapid advance. Every hour of delay gave Allied forces time to reinforce, regroup, counterattack. Corporal James Hewitt survived the battle. Of the 8 soldiers he'd fought alongside during that first desperate day, 5 survived: Jenkins, Washington, O'Malley, Chen, and Martinez. Private Kowalski died on December 20th from wounds sustained during the German assault. Private Anderson was killed on December 23rd by artillery fire. Private Chen lost his left leg to frostbite and was evacuated to England. The survivors returned to Iowa, Alabama, Boston, Texas, and New Mexico, carrying memories they rarely discussed. Hewitt kept the condemned Springfield until war's end, trading his issued Garand to an armorer who didn't ask questions. He carried that rifle through the remainder of the Battle of the Bulge, through the Rhine crossing, through Germany until VE Day. The rifle never failed him. When he returned to Cedar Rapids in August 1945, he tried bringing the Springfield home, but Army regulations forbade retaining military weapons. The rifle that saved his life went back into Army inventory, presumably destroyed as originally intended. The broader impact of Elsenborn Ridge was measured in strategic terms. German forces committed 12 divisions to the Ardennes offensive. They achieved tactical surprise and initial breakthrough, but American soldiers at critical points like Elsenborn refused to collapse on schedule. German commanders had calculated that green American divisions would break under sustained pressure. The 99th Infantry Division, in combat for barely 5 weeks, proved them wrong. Statistics reveal the cost. The 99th suffered approximately 80% casualties during December 1944, but they never broke. They bent, gave ground when necessary, but maintained cohesion and fighting effectiveness. The lessons learned at Elsenborn influenced American military doctrine for decades. The Army realized that technological superiority meant nothing without soldiers trained in fundamentals. Marksmanship programs were revised. Training emphasis shifted from rapid fire to accurate fire. The assumption that superior equipment compensated for training deficiencies was exposed as dangerously wrong. War reveals truth, and the truth was that rifle quality matters less than shooter quality. Hewitt rarely spoke about his experiences. When pressed by local reporters after the war, he deflected. "I did what needed doing. So did everyone else who was there. We survived because we refused not to." He worked as a machinist at a manufacturing plant in Cedar Rapids, married his high school sweetheart in 1946, raised 3 children in a small house 2 blocks from where he grew up. He attended church every Sunday, coached Little League baseball, served on the city council for 2 terms. A normal life, lived by a man who'd done extraordinary things when circumstances demanded it. The Springfield rifle disappeared into Army bureaucracy, but its legacy persisted. In 1947, an Army Ordnance Corps analysis examining weapon performance during the Battle of the Bulge noted that M1903 Springfield rifles, despite being condemned as defective, had performed adequately in combat conditions. The report acknowledged that accuracy complaints stemmed largely from unrealistic expectations. The Springfield was designed for 200-300-yard combat, and at those ranges, even supposedly defective barrels remained sufficiently accurate. The Army quietly rescinded the condemnation order. Thousands of Springfields remained in inventory as reserve weapons, eventually issued to National Guard units through the 1950s. In 1968, a historian researching the Battle of the Bulge contacted Hewitt while writing a book about the Elsenborn Ridge defense. During that interview, now preserved at the National Archives, Hewitt reflected on the rifle. Command thought it was broken, so they banned it. But broken just means it doesn't work how someone expected. That rifle worked exactly how I needed it to work. It was simple, it was reliable, it forced me to slow down and aim. In combat, that's more valuable than firing fast. The broader lesson transcended rifles. American forces in World War II succeeded, not because they had the best equipment, often they didn't. They succeeded because they adapted, improvised, and refused to accept defeat. When the Garand failed, soldiers picked up Springfields. When Springfields weren't available, they used captured German weapons. The flexibility to employ whatever worked, rather than rigidly adhering to doctrine, gave American forces a critical advantage. Hewitt died in 1998, age 78. Survived by his wife, 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. His obituary in the Cedar Rapids Gazette mentioned his service, but not specifics. Veterans attended the funeral in force, men from Baker Company and other units who'd served alongside him. They told stories not of killing, but of competence under pressure, of steadiness when everything collapsed, of the quiet courage that defines men who do difficult things and then return to normal lives. The Springfield rifle that Hewitt carried through 36 hours of combat was never recovered from Army inventory. It likely was destroyed during one of the periodic purges of obsolete equipment, but the rifle's value wasn't in its survival as artifact. Its value was in proving that sometimes the broken tool in skilled hands outperforms the perfect tool in unskilled hands. That technology serves soldiers, not the other way around. That fundamentals matter more than features. These lessons, learned in Belgian forests during humanity's darkest winter, remain relevant. Modern military forces still grapple with the balance between technological sophistication and fundamental competence. The temptation exists to assume that better equipment solves tactical problems. The Battle of the Bulge suggests otherwise. What mattered at Elsenborn wasn't weapon quality, but soldier quality. Men who refused to break, men who adapted when doctrine failed, men who picked up condemned rifles and made them work. If this story of courage and resilience moved you, make sure you're subscribed to this channel so you never miss another incredible untold story from World War II. Hit that like button and drop a comment below. What other forgotten heroes from the war should we cover next? Your suggestions shape what stories we tell. Thanks for watching, and remember, history isn't just about the famous battles. It's about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when it mattered most.